Okay. Well, we'll talk about it. Nelson, how'd you do on your reading? Okay. All right. So, just real quick, I'll leave that at that. Well, in fairness, everybody did bad. Um, not to give you guys excuses, and because that's not something I ever do, but this is year one. This is also the time for you guys to get that stuff out of your system. Now, with this class, you really got to get it out of your system. This is where we really have to pick up our dedication. And some of the things we talked about tonight that was in the reading, as far as honor and deferential regard, you have to apply those things in everything that you do to him. One of the things that the author said about deferential regard, and it's true, is if you don't have deferential regard, it acts as a gatekeeper to worship. Yeah, no, it's deferential. Deferential. We'll get to that because that's in the reading. But without deferential regard, my worship is essentially useless to him. We'll talk about that when we get to that part of the chapter.
I think that's what I'm recognizing. After I read,
okay,
I'm finding out there's a certain approach of how you, there's an order of how you pray.
That's true. There's an appropriate way to do everything.
Right, and so I don't feel like that's what I'm doing.
Right.
Even when
no, and you're right. It's not what you're doing. That's okay because right now this is where we learn how to do those things. You see what I'm saying? Now tonight we'll learn a little bit more. We're building up towards quote unquote how to pray, but tonight we're going to really talk about the different expressions because if you guys remember 2 weeks ago we talked about the soul and the spirit and the body, right? So the same way that God is not a singular entity, right? Remember we talked about how God is triune. He was Elohim, El Shaddai, and El Elyon. He's Father, Son, and Spirit. So there's always a multiple aspect of God. It's the same with us. Since we're spirit, soul, and body, prayer isn't just limited to one aspect of our being. So tonight what we're going to look at is soul and spirit. The body doesn't pray because the body is in submission or subjection to their spirit and the soul. Okay? So with that said, let's start with the first day and we'll talk about the expressions. And I don't foresee us saying like 2.5 hours or 2 hours. Hopefully not. But there is the subject is kind of dense. There's a lot of stuff in here. I'm trying not to miss any of it. So day one we talked about the prayer expressions, and there's 2 truths that we have to understand. And I just mentioned the first one, or well, no, we'll get that in I think day 3 or something, day 2 or 3. But there's a misconception about prayer that everybody has, and it's that it's a single way. It's a single way of communication. We briefly touched on that in the past few weeks. When I say single way, is when we think of prayer, we think of it as like what we just did, where we stand up and we pray. Now, if you did the reading this week, you'll see that there's at least 6. There's at least 6 expressions of prayer. And to be honest with you, the one that we consider the one that most people consider prayer, quote unquote, isn't the one that we spend most of our time in once we understand what real prayer is. So the first truth is that there's no one word that can absolutely describe the various ways, in which prayer can be expressed to the Creator. Our problem is, and like I just mentioned, is we have these preconceived notions and ideas of what prayer is because that's what we've been taught. We've been taught, like in my case, getting down on your knees and clasping your hands like this, and then saying a recited or a learned prayer. We go the Our Fathers or the Hail Marys or the Rosaries. In the Catholic world, that's what it was. Depending on where you're from, your background and all those things, that varies. For example, remember, prayer isn't just a Christian thing. Everybody prays to some, in some form or fashion. Like, for example, with my coworkers, they pray multiple times a day, right? Because they pull their prayer mats out, and when you say we're going to pray, that's what prayer is. Is they get their mats out, they do the standing up, kneeling down, prostrating, do all those different things, and it's very ritualistic and it's very mechanical. And there's nothing wrong with that. That has its place, but we just have to understand that that's not what prayer is. So the second truth is there's a connection between, and this is important, between the communication of prayer, its appropriateness, and the time presented. So what do I mean? When I say the communication, okay, the things that you say, the way that you say it, and the time that you say it are all important. You see what I'm saying? So what I say is just as important as how I say it to God and the time and season. I can never be fooled into thinking that prayer is mostly what I say. That's where you get a lot of these Jacobites, because you guys remember the story. We talked about it 2 weeks ago with the Pharisee. Remember what he said about, thank God I'm not like this guy right over here, right? Because in his mind, that was a holy thing to say. He was convinced, and we're convinced, that by saying holy words, that makes our prayer more acceptable to God. It's not true. Now, you should be respectful to God, but you should also be honest, and you should also do things in time and season. So, for example, all things need to be done in order. So, for let's say, for example, when we do our prayer time in class, or in Sabbath service, right? When it's time for us to do personal prayer, it's inappropriate for somebody to jump in and just start singing songs. Because when God does things, He always does it in order, and we always have to be cognizant of what the Spirit is doing. So, is it okay to sing songs? Yes, it's absolutely okay to sing songs in the right time. You know what I'm saying? But again, we'll talk about the different types of prayer in just a little bit, because there's different expressions. What's that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's tough. Yeah. Well, it's tough in our body. Yeah, this body tends to make things difficult, not on purpose, but the reason why is because, it's like most people in our church are coming from this kind of free-for-all worship where we do things, and I guess because I've never been Pentecostal, but there's this whole movement, at least when I was younger, where it was like, oh, it's about relationship and not religion. There's truth to that. However, when you say relationship, that doesn't mean license to do whatever you want. So the problem a lot of people have when they come to a body like ours, and we're not the only one, is you have to find that balance between being religious, so to speak, or a Jacobite, as we would call it, and doing things the way God prescribes. Because what you'll find later on in the book is when God dealt with the people in the Bible, and then when He deals with us, He always has a certain protocol that He has for everything. Yes.
Even coming from, say, a traditional church, what I came to understand was, I think I went through the phase where I was jealous, but in error.
Okay.
And then the more you learn and God shows you yourself, right, and begin to mature, you come to understand that there has to be a harmony and balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of us tip either one way or the other. So then I was like super spiritual,
right.
And then I bumped my head and I learned some things, and then I came to understand that it's not always that way,
Right.
And so then
There
that
you
you
go.
should be doing. So, and if we do that, then the balance, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
and she brings up a good point because we tend to be one way or the other generally, and it's usually either and you rarely come in, if ever, right in the middle. Now, you're either super spiritual or you're super what's the word? I mean,
It can be legalistic.
there you go. That's something like for you're either legalistic or you do everything by the book, or you kind of just free flow, and that's okay. That's normal. His idea or his plan is okay. Let's take everybody. Let's move everybody to the center. Right. Let's have balance and let's have harmony, and that is an issue of maturity. And in both cases, I was talking to somebody today. You know, when you learn about honor, when you learn about respect, deference, regard, all these other concepts that deal with me doing things his way, there comes that season of, okay, I'm just going to be quiet and learn, and it can be very humbling too, because for that in that season, what do I do? It's really hard for me, and everybody has to ask that question: what am I supposed to do? There's no real answer to that. You just let him teach you. You let him sanctify you. You be obedient to what you know to do, and as you become more obedient to those things that you know to do, because it can be really daunting when you look at all the things he wants you to do, and and you think you have to do it all at once. No, you have to do it, little by little. You know what I'm saying? That was a very tough time for me too, because yeah,
Just the way, like, you feel like, I'm going to say the pushing the spirit.
okay,
You kind of feel like the presence of the Lord, like this morning, before I left this morning, said my wife down to work, and I know I felt the Lord, like, and I hate saying the felt, because felt is like, because I still don't know. There were times when I was really good at it, I felt off so bad, and I know somehow I felt the Lord, like I was laying down, man, all this lightning was going on outside, and I thought I heard a small voice, Nelson. I'm like, and I keep hearing it, but it's like it kind of felt faint.
okay,
This felt faint. Anyway, making a long story short, and after a while, I was like, man, if this ain't if you don't feel the Lord, what is it that I feel? You know what I'm saying? It's like, so I'm
okay,
like, okay, if the Lord is not, if you can't feel the Lord, I mean, even if I still don't see the scripture where you feel the Lord, I feel the Lord.
yeah,
It's like I feel the presence of the Lord.
yeah,
I feel like something telling me to pray, or something telling like something is come to me
yeah,
to get up and pray.
okay.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, okay, is that the Lord? Feel?
Well,
if that's
yeah,
not scriptural,
yeah.
it's not scriptural, and I don't need to be talking about feeling nothing, because I'm like, okay, well, what is it I feel?
Well, let's answer that question. Yeah, you can't feel the Lord. There's the best that you can do, and what people call feeling the Lord is their soul's response to what they perceive as the Lord. Whether it's actually the Lord or not, it's the soul responding to that. But actually feeling Him, quote unquote. I mean, you're dealing with, how do I say this? You're trying. It's like you're putting Him in the physical realm when He's not. He's supernatural. Now, will He say? Will He talk to you? Will He do those things? Yes. But the reality for most of us when we say we feel the Lord isn't really, quote unquote, feeling Him. Now, that's not to say that He wasn't speaking to you, but there's times when you have to take what you think was Him, and we look at, okay, then what was He doing? So if He said your name, what was your response? See, because it's one thing for you to hear Him and think that was Him and do something about it, and then hear Him and then not do anything about it, but wonder if that was Him.
Sometimes I can't. I'm not can't say that as far as identifying if it's him or not. You know how people say, as far as identifying what is the Lord or not. I'm not good at hearing.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make this easy. Well, maybe not easy, but there's no way I can answer to tell you if that was Lord or not, or if there's no like, well, no, there's no formula for us to tell you, for anybody to tell you what is the Lord and what isn't. You know, that's an experience that you can have, that you have to have with Him, and that He'll make known that it's Him.
Yeah, where's the church?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I've not heard something about that.
Okay.
I always want to make it clear because I'm like, how do you discern if it's him or not?
And that's what I was just telling you. There's no one answer I can give you for that. I mean, the best that you can do, and we talked about that the other week, is you have to know His Word, because His Word is not gonna, it's gonna either confirm or deny your experience. You see what I mean? He's not gonna act contrary to what His Word says. So He's never gonna say anything that is inconsistent with everything else He said. And if you trust that this is where you're supposed to be, and that you're learning the things you're supposed to learn, He's not going to say anything that contradicts that either. Because the Spirit, He's working in everything that you do. You see what I'm saying? And they're always going to be in harmony. So your best bet, you should continue to seek Him. You should. But you're going to initially learn about Him most in your Word. Mm-hmm. You're going to know that that's where you're going to learn His character. That's where you're going to learn the things that He tells us to do or tells us not to do. But we do have to move on, because that kind of leads us to the next part. Is here's what happens if we don't discern the difference between the content and the manner, in other words, the way that I approach Him, then the best that we're going to have, this sounds harsh, is unholy communication. Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you separate the two, your communication is going to be unholy.
Oh, okay. Can you just repeat what you said then?
Okay, if I separate the content, in other words, what I say, from how I say it, then if I look at those things as separate entities and I don't understand that they work together, my communication with Him, or my communication altogether, is going to be unholy. So let's look at some unholy communication misconceptions. Is anytime that I have unholy communication, the reason why is because it's originating in my flesh. Every time, even if it sounds really good, it's unholy communication. And it's not limited just to prayer. So I don't know if any of you has your Bible, but I want you to pull up the scripture, Ephesians 5:4. And again, what I'm trying to bring up here is that unholy communication is not something that's just related to prayer. Everything, unholy communication is everywhere in our life. We don't realize just how much how pervasive it is in our life. So we all do, and and that's why He sanctifies us. He doesn't just sanctify us; He sanctifies our communication. Ephesians 5. Yeah, I want you to read verse 4.
Also out of place are obscenity and stupid talk, coarse language. Instead, you should be giving thanks.
Stupid talk, coarse language, and obscenities are all, yes, and me too. Yeah, it's true. We all do, and we just don't really realize it. Now, go back to verse 3 before we move forward.
Among you, there should not even be mentioned sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or greed. These are utterly inappropriate for God's holy people.
So He takes unholy communication, and He basically compares it to sexual immorality, impurity, greed, What else? And all those other things that you mentioned earlier. So reality, unholy communication. When we pray, here's the point: when we pray in a way that's inappropriate, not just in the words we say, but in our offering of prayer and in the time and season, it's just as bad as all those other things. So we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to, okay, Lord, it's really hard for me to talk about it now because we're not at that part yet, but we have to be doing the appropriate types of prayer. Sure. Good. Okay. Yeah. I understand. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you should though. You should go up there because that's a time of presentation for your Lord. I remember prayer, sacrificial giving, instruction, all of them are worship. So you should go there as an act of worship. However, keep in mind that prayer isn't just relegated to Sabbath. I mean, if you have issues, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, if you have issues in the soul, if you have issues in your spirit, prayer it's something that He's given us to express those issues to Him, and it shouldn't just be in church. The prayer in church should be like the least prayer you do all week. To be honest with you, I should be doing my meditation. I should be doing my audible speech and my crying and all these things. I should be doing that on my personal time as well as in church. Me being there on Friday night or whatever day, that's just me presenting myself to Him on the day that He told me to present myself. You shouldn't even, let's be honest, you shouldn't be up there having to confess all these sins on a Friday night. That should have been done. Yeah, that should have been done daily. That should have been done on Thursday on the day of preparation. Now, if you didn't do that, it's acceptable to do it for the Lord on Friday nights. However, understand the purpose of that Friday night. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But you should. Yeah. Yeah. I know. But yeah. I know. Well, why are you looking at what does it matter? And this is, yeah. I'm trying to say it doesn't matter who's around you because communication, prayer is not, it's not between you and anybody else but your Lord. But keep in mind, but you're right, you should have that, to some degree, you should have that consideration as far as time goes because, the Lord He's allotted a certain amount of time for different things. But that's why prayer has to be a daily thing. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's fine to say that. It's okay. Yeah. Yeah. But okay, we're going to talk about that in meditation. So we'll put that down for now. But that's a meditation issue when we get down to the first expression. That's something that you should be doing. But we will get to that because that's a classic meditation issue, and that's something that me and everybody else has had. We always think about the possibilities. What if this? What if that? But if I'm not properly meditating, if I'm not doing that enough, I'll never come to a resolution. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So then, that's the importance of spiritual guidance. And I have to let Him speak to me. I have to let Him. And when I say spiritual guidance, is when I was telling you to read your scriptures. I say that, and that sounds like a generic answer, but if you're not reading your scriptures and you're not seeing the principles that Him and the Spirit are telling you about prayer and about how to live your life, there's no way you'll ever do prayer the right way. Like for example, If you don't have wisdom, what does the scripture say to do? You got to ask, right? You'll see why you don't get that either. Part of that's because it's inappropriately done. But and again, we're working through that. That's not a condemnation on you. It's something that we all have to learn how to do correctly.
It's just the difference for me. It's like, okay, I feel like just meeting people. When you meet someone who actually has not even talks that story.
Yeah.
I don't know, something about stuff that I think I saw some life about it. I just like to need guidance.
You do.
You need guidance.
Well, let's be real for a second, okay? let's get down to some not personal issues, but some real issues. Is how often you read your scriptures?
I think I do.
No, I'm sorry, I shouldn't ask that question. How often do you study your scriptures? That's going to be one of your problems. Because without study, and this goes for you, me, everybody else, without study, if I'm just reading it, and you should be doing your daily reading, without study, there's no way you could ever know the intricacies and the important things, the deeper things of the Lord. And that's where you're going to have confusion. It's because if I'm not getting deeper, then at best, all I have is a surface knowledge. I see what it says, but I don't understand what it means.
Well, there's no study too. I was at a church before. From quarters.
Yeah.
Spiritual words, something like that.
Okay.
And then I recognized a lot of things like less of it was Hebrew.
Okay.
Less Hebrew in there, all Greek, all English, whatever down there. And you the word was written in Greek. It was written in English. In Hebrew. So I'm like, okay, where do I get it? As all the stuff in my Hebrew. Where do I go? What site do I go to? You truly understand how to look at such like that. Understanding to break down these words for application.
Well, Greek and Hebrew is just one part. You have to understand the manners. You have to understand the customs. You have to understand the environment that they're in. We've been talking about this in scripture study for over a year now. I need to understand, okay, and I don't want to go on too far of a tangent, but I need to understand, okay, who was speaking? Who is he speaking to? What language are they speaking? What was the setting? And that's all part of study, is finding out all of those things. Mm-hmm. No, a lot of it is you can just pick it up on context clues. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I taught that series. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I have. I can find it, but me and Sean taught that series about how to study the scriptures. No, that was years ago. Yeah. And believe me, when you study the scriptures like that, it comes to life in a whole different way. I'm not saying just studying for the sake of studying. I'm saying study because without it, you'll never really know him. And I say you'll never know him. You'll only be acquainted with him. Why am I secure in my salvation? Because I know him. I know what he says. I know what he does. I know what he promised, and I've seen it. But if I don't know what his promises are, then how can I live that life? How can I have that security? But we got to get to the next part. So then there's some dangers, and we call random prayer. Random prayer, I wouldn't say that we see it a lot in our body. But random prayer is kind of when you get up there and you start talking and saying different things, but not based on understanding or knowledge. Somebody posted something on Facebook. I don't know if y'all were on there. It might have been Chris Matthews, about this woman that was, and it was a joke, but she was prophesying, but the stuff she was saying made absolutely no sense. I mean, if you just listened to it, it kind of sounded good, but what she was saying made no sense at all. There's dangers to that in prayer. And the point that he's making in the book is, you got to think before you're actually speaking, you're actually praying. That's where the meditation part, that's where the intellect comes in. Yeah, okay. Like that lady, she was just talking, and what she was doing, she was parroting things that she had heard in the past from other people. You see what I'm saying? So when I'm praying to the Lord, let's say when I'm doing audible speech, I can't just say things um, that I've heard other people say, and it's a classic example of what we did in the Catholic Church. I was talking about it earlier. Our Father who art in heaven, blah blah blah. Jesus did say that prayer. True. That was his prayer. Huh? Yeah. Oh no, there's nothing wrong with saying it, but when people say, "Okay, it's time to pray," and I just repeat what he said, you know.
And then, but you're, I guess you're using that as an example as to what we would do even say with someone else. Like she repeated different things that she had heard other people say.
Oh, when I was a kid, I learned the Lord's Prayer. We call it the Our Father, right? I didn't know what it was talking about. I just knew the words. I knew the words because it was learned behavior. But there was no foresight, there was no forethought, there was nothing that went into that came from my spirit or my soul, other than this is what I memorized. Yeah, I probably can't even remember it now, but what's the point? Point is, okay, that took no thought. That took, and another one, Hail Mary. We just did Hail Mary, Mother of God, or full of grace, this and that, and there was like two parts of the prayer, right? I was taught, okay, let's do the Hail Mary, let's do 10 of them, and everything will be okay. I didn't realize I was worshiping Mary. No forethought. You see what I'm saying? But it was ingrained, it was put in my mind that this is how you pray.
So it's like the Lord tells you what to say.
He should, yeah.
I'm fumbling around with words, I'm hearing something. Like I'm hearing the Lord speaking to what I need to say among people that we hold a hand and I'm praying with them. And I was hearing words to say.
Okay.
I haven't really had that experience. Well, I haven't had that experience for a long time. I think it's my level of submission or level of whatever I'm going through now. So I guess my whole thing is trying to.
You're thinking too much. I say you think too much. There are times when I mean, you need to have forethought, but you analyze it too much. If the Spirit tells you to do it, then you do it. If it's Him, sometimes it's not Him. But He honors that He honors your obedience even if it's not Him. Now, with that being said, you need to get better, and we all need to get better at, okay, Lord, is this really of you or is it really of my flesh? And we have to be honest with ourselves. You know what I mean? Because here's what I caught myself doing, and I realized it one day when it was up on the Bel Air Church, when I would say the same exact prayer every single time. I mean, there was nothing wrong with the content of the prayer, but I had to realize that no, my flesh had gotten used to saying, again, and it was scripturally sound, but I had gotten used to saying the same exact thing over and over again. Where now it's okay. I don't even think about what I'm saying anymore. It has to be personal. There has to be that time of meditation, and if I'm not spending more time with Him in meditation and even the other, the crying and emotional stuff, I'll never have that dynamic relationship that I want. So, what are the dangers? If the dangers of having random prayer is, number one, like I said, your prayer becomes ineffectual. It serves no purpose. Yeah. Because I mean, He's not stupid. He knows when I'm just going through the motions. I don't even know if we're on. Yeah, I think we're day one. Now, the other danger is it leads to chastisement, and it has to lead to chastisement, because at this point, if I'm just doing, if my soul and really my carnal soul is leading me all the time, the only way that He can change my behavior is through chastising me. Yeah, and He'll chastise you physically. He'll chastise you, He'll chastise you. Put it that way. And whatever means it takes for you to get the point, he's going to chastise you. How can it be devoided? And it is like you said, you have to allow the Spirit to work on you. Sometimes it's pleasant, sometimes it's not. And the reality is, most of the time it's not pleasant. At least not to me. Because chastisement, when is it ever pleasant, right? Yeah. That could be him. Nah, that's not what the Lord wants you to do. I'll speak for God when He says, "That's not what I want you to do." No. We'll think about it a different way. Maybe He wants you to be in a different. Yeah. Oh, I know, and I've been punching the nose. Yeah. But what if the issue isn't the people? What if the issue is you being in the wrong environment? Or what if the issue is you not responding appropriately in that environment? See what I'm saying? And remember, 2 weeks ago we talked about it's like that loop. He's going to make you go through the same experience over and over again until you figure it out. This is what the Lord's saying to do. Yeah. But here's the thing I see in you, Nelson, and I've talked to you about this in the past. Yeah. Well, no. What if the issue isn't you clashing with them? What if it's the issue of you just letting things go? You see what I'm saying? Because you have, and I'll tell you this just from our experience. Yeah, you do. You hold on to things. Remember what we talked about last week? Yeah. No, you. Well, you don't say things in the situation, but you say things later. You see what I mean? So, what's the point? The point is, the answer. It's a lot of times isn't what we think it. We don't. It's not what we would think that God would say. Yeah, because sanctification never has to do with anybody else. When He's sanctifying me, He's not sanctifying the people that are around me in my situation. He puts me in situations that's perfect. And when He's chastising me, He puts me in situations to where He'll punish my soul until I learn to deal with the issues. You see what I mean? Like the thing that we talked about. That's one of them. Like this thing that we talked about last week. Afterwards, we were talking about with your mother and stuff. Yeah, He's going to put you in those situations. So, okay, all right, Lord, I get it. But you'll deal with that, and I did the same thing. Yeah. Yeah, but see, the thing is, but you still deal with it later on. Yeah. Yeah. Right. But you're not supposed to have it. Yeah. Right. I know. And here's what I'm listening to right now. I'm listening to your carnal soul, because your carnal soul, it's describing his method of thinking. See, situations. That's not what situations are always about. But we got to take that offline because I have to move on. We're in day one. So let's get into the proper prayer expressions. Now, and these expressions, there's two of them. They're the things, as he put it, the things that make your prayer appropriate. All right. So if I want to have appropriate prayer, I have to make sure that these two things are in effect. Number one, the honor. Honor is the first thing that I need to have in order for my prayer to be right in His eyes. So what is honor? It's a showing of high respect or special merit. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on honor, but let's look at some of the considerations. It's the single most appropriate action someone in an inferior position takes to give special merit to somebody in a, in a superior position. In other words, I honor God because I'm inferior and he's superior. So, 2, honor is it's of the most importance to Yahweh, of most importance, whatever. The entire Godhead must be honored. It makes prayer appropriate. And, okay, so I got some questions here. So what does a lack of honor do? Or what does a lack of honor cause you to do or not do? See, when I honor him, I put his ways above all things. That seems very cliche. It seems like a very simple thing. But in reality the reality is we don't put his things before our things.
When we honor him.
Yeah, when I honor him, I'm going to put his ways above all my ways. Because he's superior to me. Because he's due my honor, he's due my respect, he's due all these things because of who he is. Now, again, we say that mentally, okay, yeah, we need to honor him, but do we really honor him? No. We talked about that with the foolish jesting. You know, in our communications, we dishonor him. And so what other ways do you guys think that we dishonor him? Or do you dishonor him? Okay.
I'll probably, get on my phone and get on the internet and check out news first in the morning or go to Yahoo or
Okay.
check out cars or something like that in the game.
Right.
That first at
Right.
times. I wouldn't thank him,
Okay.
I would check my bank account.
Yeah. In other words, you take care of yourself, and your desires of your soul, and there's nothing wrong with those desires. Right. Okay. I'll give you all an easy one, and this is for everybody listening here too. Most of us didn't do our reading this week. That's a lack of honor.
I struggle with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I struggle, well, right now, I feel like I dishonor him with my attitude.
Okay.
I dishonor him in a lot of my responses, especially at work. I dishonor him, like, one thing that I'm really struggling with, because I ask God to help me is, right now, I'm consumed by work.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know that, like you were talking about earlier, about the relationship, that's not gonna happen when he's not first.
There you go.
And so I'm really, really struggling in that area, drawing those healthy boundaries and stuff like that.
Right.
And saying, you know what, get me some help, but I'm not gonna put this job before my God.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily with my mouth, but with my actions. So, I mean,
That's
there's
true.
lots of ways I'm dishonoring.
Yes. And we're all dishonoring God, in some form or fashion. And a lot of it's relative to where you are on the life cycle. Some people are explicit with their dishonor of God or their lack of honor. Some people are not so explicit. Like you're saying, we don't consciously say, Lord, I'm going to dishonor you with my actions. Do that. But when we really look into ourselves and examine ourselves the way that he's talking about in this book and really in general as we prepare for these last days, we really dishonor him a lot more than we think we do. And we wonder why, okay, Lord, why aren't you doing things with me? Yeah, he's doing some things, but why am I not living to my potential? Well, no, there's a specific lack of honor that you have. That's, and I like how he said it. It acts as a gateway.
But honor does.
Both of them. honor and deferential regard. It's without it, I don't have holy. There's no way I can do things appropriately in His sight. How can I approach God and do? And let's say God called you to be, I don't know, whatever, a singer, right? Think about how many singers out there that claim that they love God, but dishonor Him with their actions. What kind of effect does that have on you? Not just the world. Forget the world. What does that? What happens to their credibility?
And all that type of stuff, that's like, because Nelson and I both sing.
Okay.
But I don't really do it right now because of I guess the lack of honor.
Okay.
Because you can't. Well, a lot of people do because I have sang with a lot of people who sing, but the lifestyle is not there.
Okay. When you say sing, what do you mean? You mean like in when you go to worship at church, or do you mean?
Yeah. Well, when I say sing, I mean like with the choirs, like in traditional churches
Okay.
and stuff like that.
Okay.
But at home I have my own worship. That's different.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're ministering,
right? Okay, I got you.
And your lifestyle does not match, or you're not honoring God in that, then people see that.
Yeah.
People can see that, depending on the setting or whatever, and it can affect.
Yes.
And so for myself right now,
right.
I'm so far removed from that, and it has a lot to do with what's going on in my personal life. Right.
And the answer isn't to stop singing, even though that's you said you did. What's the answer? The answer is if I recognize that, okay, I have an issue with my honor, then I have to start honoring Him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, reality for the carnal soul, which all of us have an active carnal soul, that's a lot easier said than done. It is hard to at least to my carnal man, to put those things away or to start doing things the right way. But that's what sanctification is for. That's what this is here for. This DIT. That's what Friday is for. That's what that's what your meditation is for. And I really want to get to meditation because I love meditation. But that's what everything that the Lord is dealing with you, every way that He deals with you, is always going to deal with sanctification. In week 1, we talked about, I don't know if you'll remember this, probably not, the end all of prayer, of all types of prayer. There's one thing that He wants: submission. So, if I don't have if I'm not honoring Him, then I'm never gonna submit to Him. So let's hold on to that. We do, but see, those submission issues, they're isolated in the sense that in every aspect of our life, we have to submit, and there's a general thing. So we're not all going to generally submit 100%. We have to learn how to submit and honor Him in those different areas. Even though it's all part of a greater whole, I have to honor Him. I mean, I honor Him in the greater whole by doing it in those different areas. Now, is it realistic to expect us to always honor Him? Not really. Go ahead.
So are we dishonoring Him when we don't do our DIT homework?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
You're dishonoring because the thing is, there's things that He wants to. Remember we talked about last week in adoration. He wants to pour forth into you, but that pouring forth is directly tied to your worship. Now, your worship is directly tied to your honor and your deferential regard. So if I don't have those two, then I can't worship. If I can't worship, then He can't pour forth. You see what I'm saying? Or His pouring forth would be extremely limited. So we handicap ourselves when we choose to continue to dishonor Him. And we'll give excuses. And again, this is not something that's just, yeah. Oh, we don't have it. We really, and you're right. We actually don't have excuses. Right. You don't look at it that way. Yeah. It's nothing. It's not a magical thing that happens like that. It's something that you do. No, it is a discipline issue, but it's not like it's gonna magically happen one day when I'm gonna do something and it all clicks and everything works right. No, it happens little by little. I have to honor him here, and then once I can honor him here, I can now honor him here. Once I got that down, I can go here and here and here, and it builds on top of each other. You know, and I'll say this is the truth. These issues that you're having today, if you choose to submit, if you choose to honor him, will not be issues later on. They'll be so far gone from your mind. I don't deal with issues that I dealt with 10 years ago. I shouldn't, and you shouldn't either, because now I have greater issues to deal with, and that's the reality of this walk. You know, issues will never go away. You're always going to have them, but you shouldn't be dwelling on the same ones for years and years. So don't feel bad if you have issues. Mm-hmm.
Like the foundation.
There you go. No, if you have the foundation, if you don't have foundation, you can't build. Yeah, you'll never move forward. Now, again, and I hope I'm not saying this way. Don't feel bad about having issues, because you're going to have them. Because once he deals with one, he's going to get the next one, and then he's going to get the next one. He's going to get the next one, next one, until the day you go home. So don't feel guilty because you have them, but you should feel bad if you're still dealing with the same ones from last, decade. That's unhealthy. But again, you're going to have them. So let's talk about those three things, those three elements. Remember, those three elements of prayer was trust, adoration, and knowledge. We talked about that last week, and all those things. He talked about this in the book. They have a synergistic relationship. So what is synergy or synergism?
Well, I didn't do my homework,
Okay.
and I can't.
He said it in the book. I'll tell you what it is. So when you say that those three things.
Before you said prayer, the elements of prayer.
Yeah. The
Trust,
adoration, and knowledge. That's from last week's lecture.
Yeah, I did get some of the notes.
Okay. So those three things. No, that's fine. Yeah, I also have this on YouTube, by the way. No, you know I have this on YouTube, right?
You have a channel?
Uh-huh.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I email it to you guys every week.
I found the link when we got last week.
Okay. So go back and listen to it if you have to. But those three have a synergistic relationship. Those three in honor have a synergistic relationship. Now, when I say synergistic, what I mean is that if you take trust, adoration, and knowledge, and you add them together, when you have a synergistic relationship, the sum is greater than the parts. Does that make sense? So if I said, for example, 1 plus 1 plus 1, what does that equal? 3, right? In a synergistic relationship, it's more than 3. It's an exponential number. So when I have those three in effect, and then I add honor to that, my prayer is it's exponentially greater. So the deeper my trust, the deeper my adoration, the deeper my knowledge, and the deeper my honor, the deeper my prayer goes. So those things have that relationship. Because remember, when I know him, I can adore him. When I know him and I adore him, I can trust him. So now I'm at that level of trust. Now I need to know him more. And that relationship is always supposed to get deeper. And that's how it's synergistic, because it's always multiplying on top of itself. So those three things, when you add honor to that, your prayer life should always be getting better. You should always be getting, your understanding of him should be getting deeper. You know, the issues that you deal with should become lesser. I mean, there's some mathematics to this, but just understand that no, it's always going to get better, for lack of a better word. So what are the vital considerations we have to take when dealing with prayer and honor? Is not only does my prayer have to honor him, and we already talked about this, but my behavior has to as well. There's no such thing as me honoring him, but my behavior not getting better. You know, I chalk up my immature days to my hormones and my immaturity. Reality. When you're in your teens and 20s and 30s, and I'm in my 30s, you know, you're gonna make some dumb decisions until you're mature. Um, but if I'm 34, which I will be next month or 2 months, and I'm still acting like I was when I was 25, even in the natural world, you see a problem with that. You know, you say, yeah, you know, a regular person is acting like a kid. You're like, what's wrong with this guy? You know, in the kingdom of God, actually, if I'm praying like I am, like I was when I was 20, when I'm in my 30s, or when I was a believer, as you know, if I'm praying the same way as a servant, then what's going on? Yeah, there's definitely a problem with that. And those are just the considerations you have to make. Now, let's get to the second element. I don't know if you call it element, but it's the second expression, rather, which is deferential regard. We touched on it earlier. So what is deferential regard? And you want to be able to define this so that it actually makes sense. Because there's some
Can I read it from in here?
Yes, good.
It is the conscious, courteous yielding of your human will to the divine will.
Okay. So when it says
that's good.
conscious and courteous, what does that mean?
Courteous. I guess not force.
Okay. True. Let's use another word.
What word?
Voluntary.
Yeah.
See, when I do something consciously, and like you said, I'm doing it out of my own volition. I do it because I want to do it. You know, can I do things, you know, out of strict obedience? Yeah, I can.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but that's going to make life very hard for you if all you're ever doing, if all you do is always out of just, I'm doing it because he says I have to do it. You know, what does that tell me? It means that my knowledge and my adoration aren't there. If I'm doing it just because it says I have to. No, if I'm doing it because he says, then I know it's, you know, I really don't know him that well, or as well as I should. So.
Just like example.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I always say that the people in Texas, they're aggressive on the freeway. They're very aggressive and rude a lot of times.
Okay.
And so when I have conversations with people from Texas, like there's this one lady who was very adamant about how she felt about the freeways, and I told her, I said, well, just suppose that I was the type person that never wanted to yield either. You have two people, and neither one of you want to yield, then where does that lead you?
Right. Accident.
You know? Yeah.
Or you just both get stuck and there's an impasse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good example. Here it's, you know, we're going to butt heads with God because our soul man isn't always going to agree with the path that he takes us. But in the end, I either yield to him or I let him crash into me and kill me. Because I'm not going to hurt God.
Right.
I'm not going to get him out of the way. And, you know, using her example, he's going to get me out of the way. And I'm going to be the one getting hurt. You know, and either I'm going to die or I'm going to submit.
Because I chose not to yield.
There you go. So deferential regard says, okay, Lord, I'm going to yield my will to yours, no matter what. Now, no matter what, we say that.
No matter what, really?
Yeah, but that's a very relative term.
No matter what.
It's relative to.
I think I used to be better at that. I'm not as good these days. And you know.
Well, you know why?
But you know what I'm saying.
No, it's because you understand better what no matter what means. See, we say those things. Oh, Lord, I'm going to follow you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we say it. We say it. But then when he takes us where he said he was going to take us, what happened to no matter what?
I mean, but I still, there are, like, I guess I don't, maybe the honor, talking about the honor not being there, which leads to those other things, adoration, trust.
Okay.
And I have a whole lot of things in my like, even though I'm struggling in my relationship with the Lord, I've still I shouldn't say that. I wanted to say I made up my mind, that I'm gonna serve him no matter what.
Okay.
And as I'm talking it out loud, I say that, but yet I'm not honored. You know what I mean?
Right.
Hmm.
But it's a good thing to say no matter what, and you should, but understand. And it's I mean, I'm speaking in general here. There's no way you can really understand all that he wants you to do. But that's where the trust comes in, and the knowledge is. If I know that I can trust him, then no matter what becomes a reality. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because if I know he's going to take care of me, see, no matter what, even though it's a reality, doesn't mean it's going to be easy to my soul man, but it becomes a reality. And I used to struggle, and Brother Jeff used to say this a long time ago, was this walk is easy. No, it's not easy. What are you talking about? There's no way this walk is easy, because I struggled just as much as everybody else, and I still struggle just as much as everybody else. But see, when my mind is fixed, it's fixed to, okay, Lord, I'm going to do it your way, which I don't always do, and you're just going to have to take care of me. I know I can. I know, because I've done it enough times, and I've told you guys. Maybe I didn't tell you guys this story, but I wasn't working for like a year and a half. And Anne, and this is before we were married, and she was the only one working. And there was a time when she wasn't working either, and neither of us had jobs. And I knew I was supposed to leave my job, the one that I had before that, and she knew she was supposed to leave hers, because where I was, I had no worship. I left Verizon. You remember when I worked at Verizon? When I was at Verizon, I literally could not worship, because they wouldn't give me any of my worship days out. And that's when I knew, Lord, what do you want me to do? It's time for you to go. There were other signs along the way. But what's my point is, I had to leave that job trusting that he was going to take care of us. Now, did he take care of me? Yes, he took care of me. How we made it that long with zero income coming in, I could not tell you. I can tell you that money came from places that we did not expect. I didn't realize I had a retirement account. I was sitting at Verizon that they had been contributing to. And when I needed those few $1,000s, they gave it to me. I took it, and they gave it to me. Or I said, give me money, and they gave it to me. And it was little things like that, little odd jobs here and there that I found that, no, even when I'm unemployed, there's nothing that can stop him from taking care of me. But see, but our reality is, why don't we trust him? It's because we have an elemental fear of death, or of whatever, of struggling, of whatever it is. We have that basic fear. Okay, and that derails our honor. That derails, and we may not want to dishonor him, but it takes us away from it. Okay, so let's move on to the three soul expressions, and we're not going to spend equal time on all of them, but just understand that there's three in the soul, and there's three in the spirit. Now, when we talk about soul prayer, we understand that the expression is really just a vehicle by which the spirit allows the use of, or allows you to communicate with him. So let's look at some expression realities. Number one, human beings can choose to express their prayer, in the soul at least, in one of two ways: audible or inaudible. There's really no other. Your soul doesn't have that kind of magical connection to God, even though he can hear your inaudible prayer. Your soul it's what it is. It's your soul. It's your intellect, it's your emotions, and it's your persona. So there's only two ways to express, and we're going to find out that two of those are audible, one of those is inaudible. Let's see. Second reality: only the soul and the spirit have the ability to generate prayer expressions. In other words, you can either pray to your spirit, you can pray to your soul, but your body doesn't pray. Your body simply obeys to the soul or the spirit, or both. Considerations: we have to know, or we should be better at knowing: is it my spirit praying or is it my soul praying? That's not something that you're going to know right off the bat, but you're going to get better at it. And then the prayer expressions are interchangeable. Okay, so the three soul expressions I'll give you them up front is meditation, audible speech, and emotional crying. The three spirit prayer expressions are ejaculation, spiritual crying, and pouring forth. So meditation, at least for me, it seems like this is the one I ended up doing the most in my life. Well, let me back up real quick. When you're dealing with soul prayer, or when you're doing soul prayer, it's your soul expressing soul issues. So issues in my intellect, issues that affect my emotions and my persona, I want to express those in the soul arena. So I'm either going to meditate on these soul issues, or I'm going to meditate on, or I'm going to audibly speak them to the Lord, like we did, or I'm going to cry about it, which is a legitimate form of soul prayer, because there's some soul issues that will literally make you cry. Oh yeah. It can be a lot of things, yeah. And a lot of this is going to be, remember how we talked about how most of us are primarily soul or emotion, or intellect or emotion? It's going to be the issues in those areas. Like for me, I'm primarily intellect. I'm heavy on the intellect. So intellectual issues are what stress me out. Now emotional issues stress me out, but it's like that's a whole different monster. Because with those, since I'm not, I don't lean that way. They're tougher on me because I don't know how to handle them. But again, this is why the Lord gives us multiple issues, or multiple expressions of our soul prayer. So let's talk about meditation. It's the intellect. Write that down. It's the intellect. It's choosing words to communicate in prayer, but it does it inaudibly. Now, see, when you're meditating, it's your intellect, and he's speaking, but he's speaking inaudibly. In other words, he's not speaking out loud. The best way for me to express it is he's thinking to himself. And you'll find that we meditate, we're praying a lot more than we think we are when we're meditating on these soul issues. Because again, it's something I said earlier, when you're meditating or when you're doing any kind of soul prayer, you're dealing with soul issues. So when I'm thinking about, man, Lord, what am I going to do? When I was doing this whole, when I was out of a job, I did a lot of meditation. Lord, what am I going to do? What do you want me to do? And there was all these different questions. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a second. But let's get into what meditation is. It's not expressed in verbal conversation. We know that. Okay, let's say what meditation isn't. Meditation is not what you see a lot of these, TV guys or whatever, people meditating and chanting and doing all that kind of stuff. For them, that's meditation. Yeah. And that's a legitimate form of whatever they're doing. But as far as prayer goes, that's not considered prayer. That's not what meditation in prayer is. Meditation, it can vary in length. I can meditate for 10 minutes, or I can meditate for 10 years, depending on what the issue is and depending on the resolution of the issue. Sometimes the intellect cannot form the words. You know that. And it includes reflection, contemplation, and worship. So when I'm meditating, I could be reflecting on things that are going on. I could be contemplating what I need to do, or I could just be worshiping him. I can be honoring him in my thoughts. But usually when I'm meditating, it's because I have issues in my soul. I'm having unresolved intellectual issues. In other words, I don't know what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do something or what needs to be done or what I should have done. And it's really hard for me to I don't know what's the word, to kind of like boil it down to one or two things because it just depends on the issue, you know. So what's the point? The purpose of meditation is, okay, I have this soul issue, whether it's intellectual or emotional, and in my mind it's me trying to work through it. You ever done that? Do you know what I mean? Work through it. So in my meditation, okay, I'm considering a lot of different things. What's my present natural reality? What does God want me to do? What does the word say? So I have to take all these things and put it together in my mind. And however long it takes for my soul to be satisfied with the answer is however long I'm going to be meditating in prayer. I can meditate 10 minutes today, shelve it, come back tomorrow, come back in a week, and get back, pick up where I left off, do the same thing. So the thing with meditation is there are no time restraints. It's, here a little, there a little, or I can just be in a block meditation session. I can meditate when I'm driving. I can meditate when I wake up, think about the Lord, think about what I need to do. But it's a very effective way of me dealing with my issues. And if you're not meditating, which you are, you just don't realize that it's prayer yet. But if you're not, whatever, you can have a very hard time dealing with those issues. Because soul issues aren't issues that the Lord's just going to, take care of. It's like if you ask me a question about whatever particular issue, and I give you a scripture about it, all I'm doing is giving you, something more to meditate on to help you deal with it. But your soul doesn't immediately, just receive it all the time and say, oh, okay, that's it. It takes time for my soul to digest it and put everything together and, okay, now I'm resolved to doing this. And that's really what happens. That's when we talk about dealing with the sins that we're committing now, a lot of it is resolved through meditation. Is me, okay, Lord, I am no longer going to do this, or I am going to do this. But your soul has to come to the point of, I'm satisfied with the path, and now, now I'm able to do it. Now, does the soul have the ability to do it right away? He does, but it's not realistic in a practical sense. If my spirit just takes over and I'm able to do it, then yes. There are certain issues where you don't even question. I can do it right away because I've meditated that on that in the past, and that's not an issue for me anymore. But those harder issues and those things that we meditate on now, yeah, they take time, and you should be meditating on those things. Like we've been talking about. Same thing with you is when I'm dealing with it. All right, Lord, show me what you want me to do. Chew on it, and keep chewing on it, keep chewing on it, keep chewing it. All right, study Him. Understand that He's going to take care of you, and one day, all right, we got this. I can now put that down. But that for me, that's my favorite form of prayer, because that's for an intellectual person who likes the mental gymnastics. It's very effective. Now, what is the second soul expression? It's audible speech. Audible speech is really just, it's not the same as meditation in the sense that, it doesn't have time restraints. Audible speech is really, expressing what my soul is thinking through my mouth, saying what's on my mind, speaking to the Lord, what's on my mind. It's what most people are accustomed to, because that's what we do. And that's what we see most in Scripture. Scripture isn't going to say, oh, and Jesus meditated. It's rarely going to say that. You're not going to see it. You're just going to see what people observed Him saying. The reason you see it is because, again, it's a physical, it's a tangible form of prayer, whereas meditation is, I could be sitting on the couch watching TV and meditating. So audible speech, again, that's just the most, it's really the soul verbalizing what it's thinking. Problem with it, and let me back up real quick, with meditation, is in meditation, you may not always be able to verbalize what you're thinking because there's so much going on. With audible speech, usually it's kind of like narrowed down to one or two issues, and we can speak that out. So let's look at the linguistic truths behind audible speech, not just prayer, but audible speech, period. It's not strictly limited to human beings. We think that humans are the only ones that can talk. Animals can talk too. What does it have to do with prayer? Not a lot, but the point is everybody has the ability to speak. Now, audible speech is the most familiar in practice. We talked about that. And the mouth plays an integral role in expressing the words of the soul. Yeah, the mouth, right? Easy. Right. Well, the mouth, and the thing is, yeah, the mouth can also express things of the spirit, out of your spirit. They can though. Yeah. Okay. All right, so let's look at facts because we're going to try to wind up. So facts about audible speech are it's based on the appropriateness to issues being considered. So when I'm speaking, when I'm doing audible speech prayer, it really is the most, I don't want to say the most pressing, but when I'm praying audibly, I'm dealing with the issue it's right then and there, whatever's in front of me right now. And the mouth only speaks what the intellect is meditating upon. So the mouth doesn't just randomly spout off and say random things. We already talked about how the body doesn't pray, right? So the mouth is just, again, it's just a vehicle to express whatever your soul is thinking. And it faces limitations. Well, we're not going to talk too much about audible speech because we all understand what it is. It's just me expressing what is going on in the soul. Let's see if there's anything important here. The mouth faces certain speech limitations in regards to the actual word. So you're not going to say things that you don't know what you're talking about. It only talks about things that it understands. So when you see people praying, they're talking about random things that that they don't really know what they're talking about, and they're trying to basically act like they're praying. No, if they don't understand what they're talking about, I don't know what I'm talking about. I was just saying it. No, that was out of your flesh. The intellect chooses to express words derived from current social concepts. So, for example, when you saw John in Revelation, even though he wasn't necessarily praying, John could only talk about things that he understood in his current reality, in his current perspective. So if John, and we don't know this for sure, we can speculate, but let's say John saw the future and he saw tanks and helicopters, right? How could John ever describe what a tank and a helicopter were? He wasn't going to write in Revelation that I saw an Apache helicopter. No, he would have described it in the best way he could in his language. So when you're looking at Revelation, for example, a lot of what he's saying, you have to understand that he's doing his best to describe what's going on. So what's my point? My point is, no, you're not, when you're praying audibly, you're not saying things you're not talking about things that are foreign concepts to you. Okay? And you're not, that's why it bothers me when people speak in King James English when they pray. I don't talk like that. That's another one of those parroting things. Like, oh yeah, I heard the book of Luke say that, so let's say that. Yeah. Right. No, you speak. When you're speaking to your God, you speak to him the way that you speak. It's true. Have you ever heard somebody pray like that? I have. Davian and I'm not gonna tell the details of the story. But we heard a guy praying one time, and he was like, beloved, I want to tell you. I'm like, man, you don't ever say beloved to anybody, dude. You only said it in prayer because it sounded really biblical. And yeah, and he was really trying to sound biblical, and that's yeah, yeah. And there's nothing wrong with the term beloved. Yeah, yeah. No, no, beloved is okay. Don't get me wrong. The word is it's okay. It's okay to say, okay to use. But I'm like, man, we knew this guy well enough to know that he doesn't talk like that. So yeah, yeah. Hmm. You sure about that? Right, right. And I get what the guy was trying to do, but we're like, no, man, you got to be real. See, because God, He sees through all that. Right. Yeah. 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 Well, maybe He did. Now, some people like that, Nelson. Some people speak like that, and I'm not faulting anybody for using those words. Yeah. Yeah. No, man, that's not who you are. You speak how you speak because you are who you are. God made you who you are. He taught you this language. He raised you here for a purpose, and He didn't ask you to speak like anybody else. So you be who you are. But some people got to put on that facade and that show. Yeah, they got to sound right. You know what I'm saying?
The sad part about that is they're fooling themselves,
Yes.
but they're not fooling God.
Right. And it's dishonest. I mean, it's maybe it is dishonest. You
Oh,
know.
you said this is
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not. Anytime I put on a front to pretend that I'm something else, come on, man. You don't appreciate that. I don't appreciate that. If people don't appreciate it, why would God appreciate that? He's not angry at him, but come on. All right. So what's the third soul expression? Wind it down.
Is that the emotional crying?
It's emotional crying. And yes, this is the one where the emotions are, the emotional part of the soul. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm telling you, there are certain soul issues that got you feeling so bad, you have to. Yeah, yeah. But you see that thing, He gave you the emotions. See, that's the beautiful thing about God is He gave you the ability to do that and to express yourself because so there are certain emotional issues and I feel hypocritical talking about it because I'm not emotional by nature. That's a lie. I am emotional by nature, but I'm not. I don't lean that way. Yeah. No. Let me tell you something. Nelson, yeah. Yeah. No.
I associate that with pain.
Yeah. What do you mean? Emotions or emotional crying?
The emotional crying.
Well, it is. Yeah.
Like when it's so deep that there are no words for it,
Yep.
and that's all you can do.
And that is
I associate.
it's not only all you can do, it's the perfect way to deal with those issues. There are times when tears was the only form of relief that I had. And for a person like me who doesn't cry emotionally or do anything emotionally, yeah, no, God gave you the ability to cry. Huh? He has his own wing, the crying wing. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. See, and we can't discount that. Now, maybe that doesn't apply to you. For me, it applies to me because I would throw away crying altogether. And so the Lord put me in situations to where I could not think myself out of this situation. Because and here's the beautiful thing about emotional crying for me. See, when I was able to cry, emotional, and see, I don't want you to, when I say emotional crying, I'm not talking about just like tears running in my face. I'm talking about the expression of my soul. It's when I allowed myself to express my soul in that way, I could finally be honest before Him. See, when I quench that part of my soul, yeah, I mean, again, fact, he gave you emotions. So when I quench that and I don't allow myself to let go emotionally before him, he can't help me deal with that. You know? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. You guys said it was a hoax. Mhm. Mhm. Just people crying? Oh. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm. That's a lot of prayer, man. It does.
I think that when that expression comes forth,
Mhm.
talking about like being real and everything like that, I think that at that point, deception to yourself mostly.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You don't have room for that. You know what I'm saying? When you get
Mhm.
to that point, it's like it's almost like becoming real
Mhm.
with yourself and with God about your emotional state.
It depends. Yeah, it depends because for some people, emotional crying is completely natural. You know, I can cry my yeah.
Yeah, but when I think about what you're saying, I don't know. I guess because I just associate it with pain and
Yeah.
deep, deep, from deep, deep within.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Let's call it soul pain because
soul
there's
pain?
yeah because there's a different type of spiritual crying that we're going to talk about that
Oh,
yeah. And these are issues that are dealing strictly with my emotions or my persona or my intellect. But yes, it is a valid form of prayer. And again, that vulnerability before the Lord, it's a very healing thing, you know, because now that it's hard to really put it in scientific terms, but if you know when I'm vulnerable before the Lord, I can now allow Him to do things in me that I normally wouldn't allow Him to do. Hmm? Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
it was inaudible, wasn't it?
I don't understand. I don't remember how she spoke. Oh, I don't remember. I have to go back. Yeah. So again, we understand that's the third, and that's probably the rarest of the three, just because most people don't consider it prayer. But it is valid, and if it's time to emotionally cry, you gotta let it go. Mm. Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, it depends if you're crying on the Lord or if you're just crying. We're talking about, as far as prayer goes, when I'm crying before Him and to Him, that's the form of prayer that we're talking about. So let's get on into the spirit expressions before we finish up. And there's also three. It's going to be, first one is ejaculation, which is, I wish Brother Jeff would have chose a different word for it, but in ejaculation and spirit prayer, it's the heart formulating the words of its prayer. And it's similar to the intellect, except it's not coming out of the soul. It's coming out of your spirit. And these are spirit issues. So let's look at some considerations. And we're not going to spend nearly as much time as we did with soul. But when you're talking about spiritual ejaculation, number one, the words expressed, they come out in a non-continuous and in an uncontrollable stream. So it's it's coming out spurts, and you have no spirit or you have no soul control over it at all. It's just your spirit. Maybe you understand it, maybe you don't. The intellect understands ejaculation, but doesn't have any input. So, let me look at this first. I'm trying to give you an example. Okay, my wife. When I went into the room, not last night, a few months ago, and I could hear my wife. She was sleeping, and she was moaning in her sleep, and so I woke her up, and I don't want to get into the details of the story, but when she woke me up, she says, "Why did you wake me up?" I said, "Because you were moaning in your sleep. I thought you had a nightmare." No, she had met the Lord. No, it wasn't a dream. She was the Lord had come to visit her. Now I asked her, I said, "Well, what were you saying?" And her spirit, and man, I forget to really get into details. Her spirit, her soul, and her body in that state had separated to where she could intellectually see what her spirit was doing, but had no input in what he was doing. But her spirit was saying hallelujah to the Almighty God, and she was saying hallelujah to the Almighty God. Again, intellect had no input. It just watched as the spirit worshiped, as the spirit communed with his God. But what I heard was, you see what I'm saying? So the spirit, and she had no control over it. It was just coming out until it couldn't come out anymore. What was her body's response? In that reality that her body was on the it fell. Her soul, third person. Me as a third person, all I heard was whatever I heard. But again, that's a form of ejaculation to me. But she knew, because I asked her what she was saying, she knew exactly what she was saying because her intellect heard it. So what's my point is ejaculation is that uncontrollable, just streaming of words. You know what it means. Your mind knows, but it has. I mean, he is completely in spectator mode.
Sometimes I know when that happens, your intellect, right? When you're in it, makes perfect sense because you want to stop.
Yeah.
Or you try to stop.
You have no control.
You know what I'm saying? Like you can't.
Yeah. No. Even times in worship, yeah, you'll see some people, and it's hard for me to really judge and tell who's doing what, but man, you can tell, and I can only tell because I've been in there. Because when your spirit is ejaculating to his Lord, you may not even know the issues he was talking about because they're spirit issues. They're not things that you were thinking out of. It's the spirit releasing those things that, okay, Lord, this is what you should be, that I'm praying about. Yeah. No, let me tell you something. When that happens, your soul doesn't even think about that because your soul has no control. Okay.
I just remember multiple
Well, that could be the next expression. Well, there's a guy I knew, and I'll have to move on after this, but and he was praying one day, and I wasn't really listening to what he was saying. A long time ago. I was in Lakewood, and he started saying, I didn't even know this, but I heard about it later on because I wasn't listening to what he was saying. But he kind of went into his like spiritual ejaculation, and he was praying about a son, about having a son, because he was saying, "I want a son, Lord, I want a son, I want a son," and that was not something that he went into prayer thinking about. You know, it was just something that happened, and when when his spirit caught a hold of his real spirit issues, he couldn't control it. Yeah, and I think for some reason he couldn't have a son. He couldn't have children or something like that, and he ended up having a child a year later on. A year later, he had a son, and he remembered that day that his spirit let go and ejaculated. But yeah, I mean, the point is, there are some things that our spirit wants to speak to the Lord that our soul just has no idea about. They're so deep seated that your intellect, your emotions are cool about it. But when you're yielding, remember the differential regard. When you're yielding to His will, and the Spirit takes over, those things come out. That's when the Spirit gives you the words to speak.
And it's kind of crazy because a lot of times people in the body sometimes
Yeah. Well, the reality is most people don't understand the different expressions of prayer. I mean, let's face it, 99% of people don't understand true prayer. Yeah. They've defined it. Yeah. Uh-huh. It's completely foreign to them, but it is. Yeah. Well, that's soul prayer. Yeah. And those are soul issues. That's where the audible and the spirit and the emotional crying comes, because anger is an emotion. Right? Yeah. Yeah. No, you don't even worry about that.
Is there any type of study on soul? Because I think this is interesting. Like to hear it broken down this way, but it pretty much does study on the.
No. And as far as the DIT?
No, just in general, like.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, well, people break it down differently. The spirit, the soul, and the body. The spirit, soul, and body. You're gonna. It should be addressed in every single class from different perspectives.
But even here, like the way the different expressions, the whole thing around prayer, because it's like sometimes you might like for me, and I've taken this class before.
Okay.
But it brings like each time it becomes more like clearer. You know what I mean?
It should. Well, because issues that you dealt with before, you're not dealing with now. You see what I'm saying? So and there should always be different layers that you're. And this is like I told you in the intro. Yeah, prayer is. I mean, your understanding of prayer this year is going to should be different from what it was the year before. But next year, I mean, this is just to give you the foundation and the principles. But next year, you should have a deeper understanding of it because you should be living it more. See what I mean? But let's move on to the second expression, because this one's not going to take too long, but it's spiritual crying. And spiritual crying, it's the painful expression of words with sobbing. See, when you're spiritually crying, you're dealing with traumatic spiritual issues. and his own, and it's kind of like the way the soul is. The soul, he has to deal with emotional issues with emotional crying.
So
This
what's
is
the difference between
Robin.
the emotional crying and the, okay, tell me the spiritual crying again, what you just said?
Okay, it's very similar to the soul, to the emotional crying.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is the actual issue. The issues in soul crying are intellectual and emotional issues.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, those are the parts of the soul.
Okay.
And with spiritual crying, you're dealing with issues of the heart, the will, and the conscience.
Oh, that's more what I think
Right.
what I was talking about with pain.
Yeah. And see, and that's where you have to determine the source.
Mm-hmm.
Is because and like I was telling him with anger, if it's an anger issue, if I'm emotionally crying or responding because of anger, it's because it's a soul issue. But the thing with spiritual issues is it's really hard to determine because we're not familiar with our heart, our will, and our conscience. And a lot of times when we're spiritually crying, there are issues that we're unaware of. At least intellectually, we're not, we're not thinking about those issues.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, I think that for me, I mean, I don't know, I guess pain is relative these days, but I think that can lead to a place where, because it's so deep, that the spirit will deal with things that you don't even realize that need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
You know?
No, and that's kind of the purpose for this stuff is because we have some stuff that's just put away and that we really don't even know how to handle.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're not equipped, at least we're not trained to deal with these types of issues, and that's where the spirit has. Uh huh. Oh.
It hurts, you know?
Yeah, and because he's the one who's forcing him to do it.
Right.
You know, the spirit has to get in there. It's like this has to be dealt with. Right. No. And then, yeah, and that's why, and instead of just tears and expressing your emotions, you're sobbing. You know, "Ah." And I haven't been there yet. I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's a whole different kind of crying. And yeah, there will be tears. Um, but yeah, this isn't just emotional expression. This is coming in. It's guttural. It's out of your spirit. Yes, and that's a good word. It's a very deep.
There's no word for it.
Right, and that's the point. I can't even necessarily put it into words. I'm sorry. Probably so. And we'll all experience this. I mean, maybe I don't remember. But yeah, and that's good. Right. Hmm. Right. It'll end. But some of those things, again, those are issues that we have to let go of. We have to make the decision. All right, Lord. Or we have to let Him take control and let us help. Have Him take control to help us, or to have Him take it away. But when we let Him have control and have Him take it away, it's not a painless process, painful process. So the third expression, very similar to ejaculation. Now remember, with ejaculation, it was non-continuous and it was uncontrollable. This one is also uncontrollable, but it's continuous. So in ejaculation, it's like, remember how it comes out in spurts? And you could be crying, you could be doing all these other things. The difference is with pouring forth. How do I say this? Well, here's what he put. The heart is addressing a main issue along with several peripheral issues. So he speaks the concerns of the heart in an uninterrupted stream. So he's dealing with multiple issues at this point, multiple issues of the spirit, and he's going to pour forth until he's done pouring forth. It's all going to come out, and he's not going to stop until he's satisfied that it's all out.
Like in one setting?
Mm-hmm. See, spiritual prayer doesn't happen. It's not like meditation that you can kind of stop and start. You know, in ejaculation, you kind of can stop and start, but the difference between ejaculation and pouring forth is spurts versus stream. That's how you want to look at it. It's very similar, to be honest, but it's just how it comes out. But no, it is in one setting, because you're not really walking in the spirit that often. We should be walking in the spirit that often. If we are, we wouldn't be having these kinds of prayers all the time. But yeah, it is in one setting until he's satisfied, and that may take a little while. I'm not talking about days, but it may take a little while until your spirit is satisfied that all his issues have been expressed.
No, I can't say that.
Mhm. Yeah. Mm, yeah. Mhm. And it could. I mean, that could be an issue because again, confession. I mean, especially when sin's built up and your spirit just will. It has to let it go. Yeah, he will. He will. No, it can be because your spirit, at some point, if you're a believer at least, when you leave, allow sin to just build up, and you're supposed to confess. Now your spirit it'll take over, and you have to let him take over.
I don't have some stuff that sometimes in my wife's house where I think part of it might be the sin in my life. I have to confess, or ask for forgiveness for it. My conscience just, like, I just feel concerned. I think that's something saying,
Yeah,
it feels like God feels that he's falling.
yeah. And a lot of times that's what your spirit does. He has to take over because you can only get so far. You know, um, and it's like the spirit's either going to let it go and do what he has to do, or he's going to allow your conscience to be seared. You know what I mean? You know what I mean by seared conscience, like just in dealing with confession. It's either I confess it and let the Lord deal with it, or actually deal with it the way I'm supposed to deal with it, or I just pretend that it or ignore it to the point that now I become desensitized, and that's what you don't want to happen. And that's why you should be. That's what we all should be living a life of confession. So it doesn't ever have to get to that point where the spirit has to let go and start confessing. You're still a believer, but when you get desensitized, there's not much he can do with you. You're at the point where now he has to just take you home because now you do more damage than you do good. And that's the reality in the kingdom is, yeah. I mean, if we're not praying and we'll talk about confession later on in the class because confession is a major part of prayer. You see, in all prayer settings, I should be confessing my sin. That should be one of the first things. That should be the second thing I should be doing. You should. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you confess the person that you've offended. Yes. you have and you have to do those things, otherwise they build up. And again, it's that desensitization. That's a very deadly thing. You know what I mean? Because that's the one thing is if I become completely desensitized to my sin and I don't even think about or want to confess them anymore, then what good are you here?
No path to healing.
Well, it's not a path to healing, but there's no way you can honor him. You can't have deferential regard. You can't pray. You can't have forgiveness for yourself. You know, you're full of sin,
Everybody's just like shut down.
right? So what good are you to him?
Right.
You know, and so for a lot of people, that I mean, that spiritual crying or that's pouring forth, if it's confession, that could be really that's his grace allowing you to do it. But see, we still quench the spirit. We still quench not just the Holy Spirit, we just quench our own spirit. You know what I mean? Because there are times, yeah, I want my spirit. You know, it's like that fire in your bones. He wants to get up and he wants to express himself. He wants to talk to the Lord. But you know, but we stop it. You know.
Sometimes I don't know what to confess. I'm like, okay, I got the truth saying what I saw.
Oh, you better start what you can. Yeah, better start with what you know.
I'm having this experience with you, and it feels more like chastisement, correction. Where do I start?
You start with what you know.
And sometimes you're like, okay, what do you say? Because I guess like Pastor Jeff was telling us some time back, remember him saying how, you know, when you offend someone, there's a way you confess, but you don't, there's a way you confess.
Hold on, I want to stop this real quick.